Welcome to the Classroom of the Elite light novel series where we cover every single volume from first all the way to last so you know exactly what's going on. And in this video, we're covering volume 1, which spans episodes 1 to 3 in the anime. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Our story starts in Classroom D at the Tokyo Metropolitan Advanced Nurturing High School, a government-funded institution tasked with developing Japan's future leaders. Our protagonist Ayanokoji was pretending to sleep while pondering a heavy topic. Can we, as human beings, ever be equal? He points out that we always chase equality. To give women an equal chance in the workforce, we enacted affirmative action. To help women feel safe, we provide forms of female-only transit. To help those with disabilities, we offer many perks. But by putting all this effort into equality, doesn't that highlight just how unequal we really are? Ayanokoji believes that no, human beings are not equal. In fact, inequality is an essential part of being human. But he also doesn't think we should just accept inequality, but at the very least, we should at least acknowledge it. And in the middle of this epiphany, he's rudely interrupted by a classmate he did not want to entertain. She was stunning, with keen eyes and beautiful jet black long hair. Her name was Horikita Suzune. Ayanokoji flinched. After running several play-by-plays on how to get rid of her, he decided the best strategy would be to just ignore her. And that worked until the girl demanded that if he didn't wake up in the next 3 seconds, she would condemn him to quote-unquote punishment. Well, so much for that, he thought, and he caved. Horikita needed his help for a plan. Ayanokoji, knowing fully well that nothing good can come from this, asked what would happen if he refused. Horikita laid it out simply. She would make his life a living hell. Thumbtacks on his seat, splashing water on his clothes, and casually stabbing him with a mathematical compass. Really, nothing was off the table. Ayanokoji, not thrilled to find out how committed she was to this ultimatum, surrendered. He thought back to when this all first started. It was April of 2015 and Ayanokoji was on a bus headed for his high school entrance ceremony. He almost fell asleep but was rudely interrupted by the following words. "You! Shouldn't you give up your seat to this elderly woman?" Our protagonist, making sure this wasn't directed at him, looked around to see what was happening. The person being addressed was a muscular blonde high school boy, and the request was from an office lady. "She's having trouble," exclaimed the office lady, being loud enough for everyone to hear. The boy refused. He asked why should he have to give up his seat. He had no reason for it. The lady was livid, pointing out that he sat in priority seating, and it's common courtesy to offer those seats to the elderly. The boy, not convinced, said that she had no legal basis for this claim. He sat in the seat, so it was up to him whether or not he would move. And it's downright ridiculous to think that he should have to give up his seat just because he's young. The office lady grew angrier by the second, asking the boy if this was any way to talk to his superior. The boy laughed at the idea, pointing out that age didn't make her a superior. And in fact, if you take age out of the equation, they were being rude to him. The office lady, still angry, was on the verge of giving up. But out of nowhere, a high school girl chimed in. Ayanokoji noticed that she was wearing his school's uniform. She pointed out that while politeness isn't necessary, by giving up his seat, the blonde boy would be contributing to the good of society. The boy was revved up. Finally, a worthy adversary. He said that while that may be true, he didn't care. The only thing he cared about was his well-being. And also, why his seat? Couldn't she ask anyone else on the bus? If seating was the objective, it didn't have to be priority seating, right? This straight up pissed everyone off. But the high school girl didn't give up. She pleaded for someone on the bus to give up their seat. Ayanokoji was left speechless at how effectively and earnestly she made her request, thinking to himself that this girl was quite capable. But even then, this wouldn't be easy. Ignoring the blonde high schooler's rudeness, everyone on the bus agreed. Why should they have to give up their seat? Ayanokoji observed carefully, and his eyes met with the girl next to him. It was Horikita, and while they hadn't met yet, he could tell they shared the same opinion. Finally, the high school girl's effort paid off, and someone gave up their seat. The bus reached their school, and Ayanokoji got out, but before he could get to class, Horikita confronted him. She wanted to know why he was looking at her. Ayanokoji apologized and said that he just wanted her opinion on the whole seating situation. Horikita confirmed his suspicions. She too didn't want to give up her seat, but it was for a completely different reason. Ayanokoji didn't want to get involved because he didn't want to be in the spotlight. Horikita, on the other hand, did not want to give up her seat because she deemed it pointless. Both of them agreed they wanted nothing to do with each other. Arriving at class, Ayanokoji had one mission: give the perfect first introduction and make friends. The last thing he wanted to do was become the loner kid, because that would make him stand out. He entered the classroom and approached his assigned desk. By this time, the classroom was half filled. Everyone was either studying or socializing. Ayanokoji wanted to start a conversation with someone, but he got too caught up in his head. And it was too late. The classroom filled up and he lost his chance. But amidst the chaos, he heard a familiar voice. It was the girl that sat next to him on the bus, Horikita. They were neighbors, and their first encounter was anything but pleasant. In fact, she expressed frankly how much it sucked that they were in the same class. Ayanokoji, not thrilled, saw it as a chance to make his first friend and introduced himself. And after a bit of back and forth, Horikita complied. And although he wasn't fond of her attitude, he had to accept she was pretty cute. Mid-conversation, they noticed another familiar face. It was the blonde, muscular high school boy from the bus, and his name was Koenji Rokusuke. Their luck just couldn't get any worse. The first bell rang, and with that arrived their teacher, who Ayanokoji could only describe as the physical manifestation of discipline. She looked to be about 30 and wore a suit, but underneath her tough expression, she had delicate features with a well-kept ponytail. She introduced herself as Chabashira Sai, their Japanese history and homeroom teacher, and she would be with them until graduation since homeroom teachers didn't swap in between the years. From there, she covered some of the details of attending the school. All the students lived in dorms, located at the school. No communication was permitted with anyone outside the school, not even family. The only exception would be if the school allows it. No leaving the school grounds, period. The campus had everything you'd ever need. Karaoke, theaters, cafes, stores, you name it. The campus spanned about 150 acres, and just for reference, you could build about 18 houses on just 1 acre. So yeah, this place was massive. It had its own currency system, the S system. Students would be given ID cards that held points, which could be used for any purchase on campus and access to all facility. Think of it like a one-in-everything credit card. Also, you can buy anything on campus with points. Points were provided by the school and automatically deposited into your account at the start of every month. You can also transfer points to someone else using your phone. And as a bonus for passing the entrance exam, all students were given 100,000 points, and 1 point equals to 1 yen. For reference, that's roughly USD $919. The students, excited by their new baller status, jumped for joy. Ayanokoji was puzzled by how generous this was. Everything seemed a bit too good to be true. The school was advertised as the be-all and end-all of success. No matter what you wanted to do, if you went to the school, you would succeed at it. That's what was advertised. For such a competitive environment, this seemed a bit easygoing. They had individual dorms and a substantial allowance. Something just didn't add up. Their homeroom teacher soon left, and it was a free-for-all. The newly rich students wanted to live life. Amidst the noise, someone called out, "Can I please have your attention?" He suggested that they do introductions since there's still time left till the entrance ceremony. And after he got everyone's attention, he went first and introduced himself as Hirata Yusuke, who loved soccer. His bravery impressed Ayanokoji, but more than that, he could feel Hirata's popularity shoot up instantly with the ladies. And so the introductions continued. We had Inogashira Kokoro, who loved Sue, Yamauchi Haruki, who played table tennis, baseball, and was a man of many talents until he injured himself and was placed in rehab. We had Kushida, the girl from the bus who went toe-to-toe with Koenji. Her goal was to be friends with everyone. But the intro stopped at a fierce-looking student with fiery red hair. He scowled at how stupid this idea was. Hirata tried to defuse the situation, but the girls in the class made it worse by calling the redhead out, which led to him leaving. But he wasn't the only one who felt this way. Several students followed his lead, including Horikita. When Hirata caught Horikita leaving, he felt a bit lonely. The remaining students kept the intros going, with Ike next, whose sole purpose here was to find a girlfriend. And of course, the girls roasted him mercilessly. Next was your golden boy Koenji, who turns out to be the heir of a massive business, the Koenji Conglomerate Group. He was also only interested in meeting the ladies. And finally, it was Ayanokoji's turn, but he was so nervous that he completely botched his introduction, and the class followed it up with claps of pity. Luckily though, it was time for the entrance ceremony. Ayanokoji attended, but it was a pretty standard affair. Afterwards, the students divided up into groups. Some headed for the dorms, while others headed up the campus to hang out. Our hero decided to go to the convenience store and he ran into Horikita. And she pulled no punches, but Ayanokoji had adapted, shrugging off the hostility with small talk. Horikita was there to pick up necessities for her new dorm life. Ayanokoji noticed something interesting. Horikita bought the cheapest items available. The small talk continued and they debated how effective their little class introduction was. Horikita won the argument by simply asking Ayanokoji how many friends he made. He didn't have a response, but it was nothing short of zero. In either case, that wouldn't have mattered for Horikita since she never intended to make friends anyways. So they shopped around, picking up essentials, and Ayanokoji picked up some ramen. They noticed free items available for students who used up their points. But their little shopping spree was cut short when they noticed the fierce red-headed student at the cashier line. He forgot his card and couldn't afford his ramen. Ayanokoji offered to pay for Mr. Redhead, and he was gracious, introducing himself as Sudo. With a swipe of his card, the bill was taken care of. And it finally hit Ayanokoji how much money he had, and made him uneasy. If you gave students 100,000 yen per month, and given there were 480 students in this school, that would be roughly 48 million or 440,415 US dollars per month. How is that feasible? They ran into Sudo outside and decided to eat their ramen by the sidewalk. When Horikita arrived, she instantly got into an argument with Sudo. Their personalities were like oil and water. After ignoring Sudo's existence for a bit, Horikita departed, but it wasn't over yet. Soon Ayanokoji and Sudo were approached by 3 second-year students. They wanted their spot. And you know Sudo wasn't having any of this. They got into a heated argument, and after Sudo revealed that he was in Class D, the students mocked him. Ayanokoji wondered, was there any meaning behind the letter classes? The 3 second-year students left shortly, not wanting to make a scene. After his meal, Ayanokoji went back to the dorms and took a look at his new room. This marked the beginning of a new life, and he couldn't be more excited. Fast forward to their first day of class, it was typical. Things like meeting teachers, course curriculums, and most importantly, people slacking off in class. But Ayanokoji struggled to make a single friend, and what's worse, Horikita made it a habit to taunt him for it. When Ayanokoji asked why she wasn't bothered by her lack of friendship, she flat out told him she doesn't need any friends. It was a minute before lunch and students already started leaving. Hirata announced that anyone was free to join him. This was it, our tragic hero's first chance at friendship. But before he could accept, a group of girls whisked Hirata away. Defeated, Ayanokoji was about to leave, but he was approached by none other than Kushida. Ayanokoji was dazzled by her looks and the fact that she even remembered his name. She had straight dyed hair and a skirt that was as short as the school would allow. But Kushida was interested in Horikita and asked Ayanokoji what type of person she was. But our protagonist, not really knowing much about Horikita, couldn't help her out. And as to why Kushida wanted the info, well, she wanted to be friends with everyone, and that included Horikita. With nothing to be gained, Kushida left and Ayanokoji went to check the cafeteria. He peeked in, but the selection wasn't impressive, so he decided to hit up the convenience store for some bread. He sat at his desk and was soon joined by Horikita. Before Ayanokoji could dig in, the speakers announced a club fair at the gym. Ayanokoji asked Horikita to join him, and she agreed, not because she wanted to help him out, but the idea of him failing miserably to make friends brought her great delight. So they made their way to the club fair and it was packed with freshmen. All the clubs looked like they functioned at a high level with the best equipment available. Any club as a newcomer seemed intimidating. Soon, the crowd was silenced, opening remarks from the student council secretary Tachibana. She was followed by reps marketing their clubs. Horikita was having a blast teasing Ayanokoji and he started to regret bringing her along. But suddenly Horikita got tense. Only one boy was left on stage. He was about 5'9", with slender black hair and a piercing gaze. He seemed a bit awkward at first, and the freshmen teased him mercilessly. But with a single gaze, the boy was able to make the entire crowd come to a screeching halt. Not a single word needed. It's almost as if every student was frozen in place. His aura was unmatched. He introduced himself as Student Council President Horikita Manabu. This set off alarm bells for Ayanokoji, and he glanced immediately at Horikita. He wondered. And with everyone glued in place, the fair ended. But Horikita was still stunned, and Ayanokoji worried, asking her what was going on, but got no response. Surprisingly, Sudo approached him with Ike and Yamauchi. Sudo came to join the basketball club, and the others came to meet girls. They invited Ayanokoji to their group chat, and this made him incredibly happy. But he looked back and Horikita had disappeared. Didn't faze him, he finally had a chance to make friends. Fast forward to the next day, and they had swimming class. All the boys were excited. Ike and a kid named the professor, quote-unquote, wanted to run a bet where they guessed which female students in Class D had the biggest assets, with actual points on the line. Horikita approached Ayanokoji, who was sitting far away from the boys. Ayanokoji, still friendless, lamented the fact that Horikita was the only one he could talk to. A thought that made Horikita physically recoil in disgust. But our hero's prayers were answered, and he was approached by Ike and let in on their little gamble. Ayanokoji still hesitated because really, this was a risky endeavor. Yamauchi came out of the woodwork, confidently claiming that Sakura was the winner, and because apparently he had confessed to her. Ayanokoji had his doubts. Lunch ended and it was time for swim class. The boys could not wait. The swimming pool was 50 meters long with fancy features like temperature control. But to the boys' surprise, none of the girls were around. Everyone waited in anticipation, and honestly, Ayanokoji was a little curious too. He wanted to see Hasabe, who was rumored to be the biggest, but Kushida as well. And of course, Horikita did not escape his interest. But the boys' dreams were shattered as the girls emerged on the second floor far away. They caught wind of what was happening. But not all was lost, as the boys were graced by Kushida and her charm. They were also joined by Horikita, and Ayanokoji stole a peek. But just a quick one, since staring could come with consequences. On the other hand, Horikita had no reservations, closely observing Ayanokoji and commenting on his athletic figure. She asked if he did any sports, to which he said no, and just chalked it up to good genes. Kushida tried to converse with Horikita, but was shot down instantly. Soon we were joined by their PE teacher, who was the definition of somebody who devoted himself to sports. He gathered everyone around, and there were 16 students. Definitely a few had skipped class. One of the boys asked why swim class was necessary, but the teacher insisted that it will come in handy. What did he mean by that, Ayanokoji thought? Class started and they all warmed up. To make things interesting, the teacher suggested a competition divided by genders with a bonus of 5,000 points on the line. But last place would have to take supplementary classes. The girls were split into groups of 5s, with the fastest overall time being the winner. The boys were judged by the top 5 finishes and then sent on to a final round. Regardless, the competition was a feast for the boys, except for Hirata, who avoided looking. The first set of girls competed and Horikita won effortlessly, finishing with a time of 28 seconds. As she got out of the pool, Ayanokoji caught himself staring. He wondered why. Was it because they were always talking? There wasn't anything special there, but he did see her as a girl, at least. Shortly after, the second set of girls competed, where Onodera finished at 26 seconds and Kushida at 31 seconds. Now it's time for the boys, and Ayanokoji had a personal mission. Don't come in first or last. Keeping low profile was everything. The boys competed and Sudo unsurprisingly came in first at a blazing 25 seconds. Ayanokoji came in 10th at 36 seconds, netting him a personal victory. Hirata took the stage and instantly caught all the female attention, which the boys weren't too happy with. But more than his looks, he was fast, coming in at 26.13 seconds. Next came Koenji, wearing a Speedo for God knows what reason. Surprisingly enough, he was in better shape than Sudo, with an impressive posture to boot. And neither of those things were for show, since he destroyed Sudo, coming in at 23.22 seconds. This pissed Sudo off, and he wanted to beat Koenji. The final round commenced, but Koenji crushed him. Amidst all of this, Kushida struck up a conversation with Ayanokoji, commenting on how well he's built. Ike caught wind of this and shot our protagonist a death glare. Ayanokoji thought to himself, don't worry, there's no way she's getting with either of us. Swim class ended and we're back in the classroom. Kushida asked Horikita to come hang out at a cafe, but was cleanly rejected. Horikita made it painfully clear, don't ever invite me to anything again. You're being annoying. But Kushida didn't waver. Ayanokoji noticed that this wasn't the first time, as Kushida had been trying to hang out with Horikita since the entrance ceremony. Kushida left with some friends, and after a brief moment, so did Horikita. Ayanokoji hung out for a bit and was about to go home, but he got approached by Hirata. He asked about Horikita and why she was alone all the time. This again, huh? Thought Ayanokoji. Ayanokoji responded saying it was Horikita's choice to be alone. Hirata seemed troubled by this and saying that this might invite bullying. Ayanokoji got right to the point, saying that this is a conversation he should have with her. It's not any of my problem, thought Ayanokoji. And with that, Ayanokoji headed back to his dorm, but he noticed Kushida outside waiting for him. For a second, Ayanokoji's delusions came to life. Could this be a confession? But shortly after, he was smacked back to reality. It was about Horikita. Of course. Kushida expressed that she was adamant to be her friend and wanted his help. Ayanokoji was troubled. On the other hand, Horikita was scary. But Kushida was also cute as hell. He was caught between a rock and a hard place. No pun intended. But in the end, his libido won out and he decided to help Kushida. It wouldn't be easy, but he had a plan. Ayanokoji would invite Horikita to the most famous cafe on campus, Play. At the cafe, Kushida would have her friend occupy 2 tables next to each other. When Ayanokoji and Horikita would arrive, he would send a signal and the girls would vacate one of the tables. Ayanokoji and Horikita would sit down at that table. And then Kushida would arrive. 2 girls would vacate the other table, placing Kushida right next to Horikita, making it all seem like a coincidence. Kushida was impressed by this plan and excited to carry it out. This made Ayanokoji a bit nervous because this wasn't a sure thing. Cut to the end of class next day, the plan was in full effect. Ayanokoji asked Horikita to come to the cafe, and after a bit of convincing, she agreed. The cafe was packed, but this was no problem. Ayanokoji made his order, sent out the signal, and they secured their seats. Soon the girls next to him left, and Kushida sat down. She attempted to make small talk with Horikita, and it worked for a bit, but Horikita scanned her environment with a sharp gaze. Not good. And before Kushida could continue, Horikita decided to leave. She said that now that Kushida was here, Ayanokoji didn't need her, right? She also pointed out that Kushida was plotting something. Sharp as ever, she saw through everything. Horikita noticed that the girls occupying the 2 tables were from Class D. She also pointed out that Ayanokoji and her came to the cafe right after class, meaning that those girls were here only for a minute or 2 tops, way too early to leave. This impressed the hell out of Ayanokoji, and he conceded, telling her that yes, they planned everything. Kushida pleaded to Horikita for her friendship, but Horikita wouldn't budge, stating that she doesn't want to be friends with anyone, and that she found Kushida incredibly unpleasant. Ayanokoji stepped in, expressing that he gets where she's coming from, and at times he also wonders if friends are necessary. In that sense, they were alike. He also reveals that up to that point, he's never had any friends. Ever. A fact that shocked Kushida. Horikita cut him off, stating that they were nothing alike. He wanted friends, but he couldn't make any. But she thought friends were unnecessary. Ayanokoji surrendered, but asked if she's okay with this. Is she okay being alone all through high school? Horikita was unfazed and proudly exclaimed that she's been alone for 9 years in a row, and it didn't bother her one bit. And with that, she departed. Ayanokoji sighed, but Kushida was thankful to him because at least she learned something about Horikita. Kushida still wanted to be her friend. This confused Ayanokoji, and he asked why she was so fixated on this. The simple reason? Her goal is to be friends with everyone, and even if she misses one person, she would have failed her goal. We cut to math class, and it's been 3 weeks since the entrance ceremony. Ike and Yamauchi were chatting loudly in class. Together with Sudo, they were rightfully named the Idiot Trio. Meanwhile, Horikita grilled Ayanokoji about his progress at making friends, which for once was bearing positive results. Ayanokoji would hang out with the Idiot Trio from time to time. Sudo came crashing in halfway through the class, but the teachers barely even noticed him. Soon, Ayanokoji received a lunch invitation from the Idiot Trio. He invited Horikita, but for her, it was a hard pass. Relationships were moving fast in class. Earlier from the Idiot Trio, Ayanokoji got the intel that Hirata was dating Kei. In Ayanokoji's head, this made total sense. Kei was incredibly girly and intense, making Hirata a prime target. Ayanokoji frowned at the fact that it would be a long time since he got anything near a girlfriend, and if he did, he hoped that it would be someone a lot nicer than Horikita. Next was history class with Sai Sensei, but today was special since it was the end of the month and they were due for a short test. The students were not happy, but Sai Sensei assured them that this wouldn't affect their report cards and was only for reference. This was weird, Ayanokoji thought. Sure, it wouldn't count towards the report cards, but it's almost like she's saying it would count towards something. The quiz started and our protagonists looked through the problems. 5 subjects, 4 questions each, and 20 in total. Each question was worth 5 points. While finishing up, Ayanokoji noticed something interesting. Most of the questions were ridiculously simple, a lot easier than the entrance exam. But 3 questions stood out because they were insanely hard, to the point where most freshmen could never hope to even answer them. Ayanokoji, not wanting to stand out, stuck to the same strategy he used during the entrance exam. It made him wonder though, what were they really testing? He glanced over at Horikita and she seemed to be having an easy time. The bell rang and the test was over. Ayanokoji joined the Idiot Trio for lunch, but this would be his true test. The Idiot Trio loved gossip and Ayanokoji was not exempt. They grilled him mercilessly about his relationship with Horikita. Ayanokoji let them know that there was no way it was happening, but Ike wasn't convinced. They agreed that Horikita was cute, but her personality was god-awful. After a bit of chatter, Ayanokoji learned that the Idiot Trio had used up all their points. How is that even possible, he thought. We cut to the next day and our hero got an invitation from the Idiot Trio to come hang out with Kushida and some others. Finally, he was glad to have friends. Class ended, it was time to meet up. Kushida was a bit late and arrived with company, Hirata and Kei, as well as Matsushita and Mori, who were part of Kei's clique. Ike wasn't a fan of Hirata and asked Ayanokoji if there was any way to get rid of him. Ayanokoji wasn't keen on this since he actually liked Hirata. In the end, Ike and Yamauchi would have to put up with Hirata to hang out with Kushida. And although the group wanted to hang out together, they had no idea what to do. So Kushida led the group and they ended up at a clothing boutique. Kei spent 30,000 points buying new clothes. Next, they went to a nearby cafe and had a good vibe going. Turns out, Kei had ended up using all her points as well, on cosmetics and a bunch of clothes. Hirata, just like our hero, was also skeptical of the allowance. It just seemed like way too much. Their conversation slowly led to the entrance exam, and it's revealed that not all of them were admitted via test scores. This raised further questions. How exactly was the school measuring potential? It was May 1st, the day their points would renew. Sai-sensei strode into class with a poster. She confidently asked if anyone had any questions. A student spoke up, claiming that they didn't receive any points. Sai-sensei assured the class that the points had been deposited. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. No one had received any points. Annoyed at the class, Sai-sensei spelled it out. The points had been deposited, and they did not miss anyone. That was impossible. Koenji started laughing. Apparently, he knew something that others didn't. He explained that since they were Class D, they would not be getting any points. And Sai-sensei backed up that claim. The students felt sick. What happened to the promise of 100,000 points? Hirata chimed in asking Sai to clarify, so she did. 98 absences and late arrivals. 391 incidents of talking in class or using a cell phone. She explained that the class's results reflect the points that they received, and all those infractions reduced their points all the way down to 0. The school measures people based on their true ability, and Class D's evaluation amounted them to being worth nothing. And just like that, Class D went from an advantage of 100,000 points to 0. Not good. But the students weren't having any of this, complaining that the rules weren't explained to them. Sai-sensei laughed at the idea, telling them that being late, using your cell phone, not showing up to class, none of these things should ever need any explanation. They were just a given. If they simply acted properly, their points wouldn't have dropped to 0. No school in their right mind would award 100,000 yen to students without strings attached. Hirata was frustrated but kept a calm demeanor, asking Sai-sensei to explain how they could get or lose points. She denied it, stating that they couldn't give up their criteria for evaluation. Think of it like a company. Would the company tell you how you're being judged? But Sai-sensei did offer up one piece of advice, and it goes like this. Let's say that you stop being late and have 0 absences. Even though you won't have points deducted, it doesn't mean your points will increase either, meaning you'll still get 0 points. You could say no matter how many times you're late or absent, it doesn't matter. So you're not really at a loss. This confused the hell out of everyone and destroyed their hopes of getting points by cleaning up their act. Soon the bell rang, signifying the end of homeroom. Sai-sensei unveiled the big poster she carried to class. It was the results of the class evaluations. It read as follows, where 1,000 points equals to 100,000 yen. Class D, 0 points. Class C, 490 points. Class B, 650 points. Class A, 940 points. It looked like everyone lost points. Sai explained that the school will dictate how many points you get, but you can spend them however you like. Some students fought Sai, but she pointed out that 100,000 yen should be more than enough to get by. But as we all know, some students went overboard with their spending. But looking at the points, Hirata, Ayanokoji, and Horikita noticed something strange. The difference in value seemed way too even. Sai-sensei dropped the final piece of the puzzle. In this school, students are divided into classes based on their capabilities, A being the most capable, and D being the least. It was official, Class D was the defective bunch. This reasoning made Horikita sick. However, there was a caveat here. Say for example, if they managed to reach 500 points, they could take Class C's position. But this upside was instantly followed by more bad news. If you fail any of the midterms or the final exam, you're instantly expelled. And judging by the evaluation test last week, almost everyone tested below a 60. There were exceptions who scored well, but there were also those who scored poorly, namely Sudo, who scored 14 points, and Ike, who scored 24 points. The average score was 65. Sai-sensei explained that if this were an actual test, anyone scoring below a 32 would be expelled, and right now 7 people met that criteria. And it gets worse. Students attend this school because it provides the credentials to join any company or any higher education. One example was receiving a recommendation to the most prestigious university in all of Japan, Tokyo University. But to have access to that perk, Not only would they need to beat out Class C, but they would need to overtake Class A. Anyone who doesn't reach that pinnacle isn't guaranteed a thing. Before exiting the room, Sai-sensei dropped the final bit of bad news. They had midterms in just 3 weeks. Class D was an absolute chaos. You had students freaking out about having no points, no future prospects, and being stuck in a defective class. Hirata tried calming people down, but that wasn't happening. It almost interrupted into violence, but Kushida stepped in, de-escalating things, bringing everyone together. Ayanokoji took a snapshot of the results and brainstormed with Horikita to figure out how the school calculated points. It was difficult because almost everyone was being late, talking in class, and causing other infractions. Ayanokoji noticed Horikita being impatient. He asked what her goal was. Was it college? A prestigious job? Why did she care so much about getting into Class A? She said that she was simply caught off guard, but it seemed more than that. They discussed how many points they had left. Ayanokoji had 80k. It was clear that the school baited them into spending points. And it worked. Hirata made an announcement urging everyone to do the obvious. Don't be late, don't talk in class, and don't do anything that would penalize them. If they didn't clean up their act, they wouldn't get any points. But there were those who didn't agree, namely Sudo, being the most outspoken, and this gave him a bad rep with everyone, and everyone wondered why they were stuck in class with this guy. Hirata asked Horikita and Ayanokoji to join in on the discussion, but Horikita refused. Ayanokoji, noticing that this might turn the students against Horikita just like Sudo, he also decided not to attend. After Hirata left, Horikita told Ayanokoji that she would not accept this. What did that mean? We cut to the end of class and it was time for the discussion. This was Ayanokoji's cue to leave, but he was stopped by Yamauchi, who was begging for points. Obviously, Ayanokoji denied him. Everyone who used up their points went into panic mode. Kushida approached Ayanokoji and they talked. Turns out she also had half her points. But mid-conversation, Kei approached Kushida to borrow some points. She was hitting up all her friends to get a bid from everyone. Suddenly, the classroom speaker erupted, calling for Ayanokoji to come meet Sai-sensei. This was confusing as he did his best to stay under the radar. Ayanokoji quickly arrived at the teacher's lounge, but Sai-sensei was nowhere to be found. Confused, he reached out to a teacher for help. The teacher had mature, shoulder-length hair that was wavy. From her demeanor, it seemed like she was friends with Sai. The teacher noted that Sai must have stepped out, so Ayanokoji decided to wait outside. But the teacher followed him, introducing herself as Hoshinomiya Chie. Apparently, she's best friends with Sai since high school. She also barraged Ayanokoji with questions and sized him up from head to toe. At times, she was being a bit too flirty, Ayanokoji thought, while she softly grabbed his arm. Before any happy accidents could happen, Sai-sensei interrupted and smacked Chie-sensei with the clipboard and ushered Ayanokoji into the guidance office. But Chie-sensei followed. Sai was having none of this and told her politely to scram. But Chie was persistent, wondering why Sai called Ayanokoji, since she never does that. This wasn't like her. After a bit of back and forth, Chie-sensei was approached by a stunning girl with light pink hair, asking to discuss student council matters. Her name was Ichinose. Taking advantage of this, Sai-sensei got rid of Chie and entered the guidance room at Ayanokoji. Our hero asked why was he called. Sai said that she would explain and told him to follow her to a secluded kitchen. Once he came closer, she demanded that he stay in place and make no sound until she said it's okay. Otherwise, she'd expel him. Ayanokoji was caught off guard. Sai closed the doors to the kitchen, leaving Ayanokoji there. Soon our protagonist heard the doors to the guidance room open up, with Horikita's voice on the other end. She didn't waste any time asking Sai-sensei why she was put in Class D. Why was she with the delinquents? Sai shot back. You think you're superior, right? Horikita argued that she solved almost every problem on the entrance exam and her interview was impeccable. If anything, she should have been at least placed in B or C, not D. Sai-sensei pulled out Horikita's exam results almost if prepared for this. She stated that yes, Horikita was right. She scored the third highest amongst all the first-year students and was pretty close to the second and first highest. And yeah, her interview was impeccable. Horikita asked again, why was she placed in D? Sai answered with another question. Was Horikita unsatisfied with being placed in D? Horikita responded with, of course. When everything's on the line, why would anyone want to be in D? Furthermore, why would anyone want an incorrect evaluation? Sai-sensei started laughing. She agreed, yeah, Horikita's academics were amazing. But who decided smart people are superior? Horikita objected, saying that it's common sense that smart people are superior. Sai rejected her opinion, stating that common sense, quote-unquote, is what created our flawed society. She further illustrated academics alone wouldn't place her in a higher class. She brought up the example of Sudo, who had no chance of being admitted if grades were everything. She also alluded to the fact that some students don't like to stand out and would happily take an incorrect evaluation. Horikita found that notion to be a joke. Who would ever want that? Ayanokoji had a sinking feeling that this conversation was about him. Finally, Sai concluded that she wasn't improperly sorted, and that she belonged indeed. Horikita wasn't keen on agreeing, venturing that she just needed to ask someone else since Sai wasn't a reliable source. Before Horikita could leave, Sai ushered Ayanokoji in, and if he didn't come out, expulsion was on the table. Ayanokoji tried to play off the awkwardness by saying he didn't hear anything, but Sai cleared it up. He heard everything. Horikita was angry, asking what's the deal. Sai-sensei explained that this was necessary and now she'd drop a hint to help Horikita reach Class A. She pulled out Ayanokoji's entrance exams. They were quite interesting. Ayanokoji scored 50 across the board on every subject. He even scored 50 on the latest evaluation test. Horikita remarked on the coincidence, but Sai cleared it up. There was no coincidence. He was doing this on purpose. Ayanokoji adamantly rejected that theory. What would he even gain from doing that? It's in his best interest to score high. If he could get perfect, he would get perfect. Sai wasn't convinced. She laid out that only 3% of students solved the 5th math question. However, Ayanokoji solved it immaculately, using a complex formula. But on the 10th problem, students had a 76% completion rate. But Ayanokoji didn't solve that one. How would that ever make sense? Ayanokoji stuck to his stance, saying that it was a coincidence. Horikita asked Ayanokoji why he was playing dumb. No way, Ayanokoji would not budge. Sai pointed out that Ayanokoji might even be more academically gifted than Horikita. She also said that not everyone goes to the school for the same reason. Ayanokoji and Koenji are prime examples. For them, A or D, it doesn't matter. And with that, the conversation ended and Sai kicked them out. Ayanokoji decided to leave, but Horikita stopped him. Was this all really a coincidence, she asked? Ayanokoji answered her for the last time. Yes, there is nothing special here. Our hero turned the tables and asked Horikita why was she so desperate to get to A. She replied plainly, for future prospects. They walked next to each other and Horikita exclaimed that she would make it her mission to aim for A. Ayanokoji expressed that it wouldn't be easy. Actually, it seemed hopeless. Let's say they followed the rules. They avoid losing points, but they had no idea how to increase their points. And Class A had only lost a few points. Even if D found a way to increase their points, so would the other classes. But the main problem was the substantial difference in points. They'd have to completely outmaneuver the other classes to even have a chance. It was a classic rich getting richer and poor getting poorer situation. Horikita would take this challenge on by herself. No way was that ever happening, thought Ayanokoji. He told her that even if she was exceptional, the others would bring her down. It wasn't possible for a single person. She agreed. The immediate problems weren't that big. Not being late, not talking in class, not missing class, all those small infractions were manageable. But the midterm was an immediate threat. Their chances of making it out with 0 expulsions were slim. Knowing this, Horikita acted quickly and asked Ayanokoji for his assistance. Of course, he refused. But Horikita wouldn't give up. She told him to think it over and that she's looking forward to a favorable reply. Fast forward to the end of the week, the class shaped up. They were way more attentive, except for Sudo, who still fell asleep. Ayanokoji dozed off but was met with a sharp stab from Horikita's compass, an effective way to correct his sloppy behavior, one he wasn't too happy with. Class ended and Hirata created a study group for those who needed it. He had reached out to the smarter students and devised a study plan. He was hoping to get the idiot trio to join him, but no luck. He did manage to, however, get all the other failing students to come. It was now lunchtime and Ayanokoji got an invitation from Horikita to join her. She wanted to treat him to a free lunch. Ayanokoji wasn't born yesterday and knew this had to come with a catch, but after a bit of assurance, he hesitantly accepted. Since his hands were tied, he opted for the most expensive meal set. And there he was, with a luxurious meal in front of him and Horikita intensely staring him down, just waiting for him to take a bite. Yeah, she wants something. As soon as Ayanokoji started eating, Horikita said she needed to talk to him. Well, here it comes. But it was too late to escape. Kind of the perfect plan. Horikita explained that most of Class D had shaped up. Half of what got their class penalized had been eliminated. Only one thing stood in their path: the midterms. And while Hirata was successful in scooping up most of the failing students, there was a problem: the idiot trio. Horikita wanted to create a study group to help them, but there was no way she was getting them together. Luckily, or unluckily for our hero, he knew them and was on good terms with them. He could bring them together. Ayanokoji wasn't thrilled to be involved. This directly went against his philosophy of not standing out. He said he couldn't do it. When met with that opposition, Horikita reminded him that today's lunch was courtesy of her, and it did indeed come with strings attached. And if he did so refuse, after the show of goodwill, she would make him her enemy. Ayanokoji remarked that it felt like she was threatening him. Horikita corrected him. It shouldn't feel like I'm threatening you. I am threatening you. If this wasn't enough, Horikita also threw that little incident with Kushida at the cafe in his face. With a little more thought, and a ton of regret, Ayanokoji agreed, trading contact information with Horikita. Ayanokoji headed back to class thinking about how to get the trio together. Sudo might bite, so he invited him to a study session, but he flat out refused, saying that he'd be fine cramming the night before. Overhearing, Ike also refused. Well, so much for that plan. Ayanokoji went back and met up with Horikita, and she wasn't surprised he failed. This wouldn't be easy, she thought. Okay, time for a new plan. They needed some bait, and it finally hit him. Kushida. Ayanokoji knew that both Ike and Yamauchi were gunning for her, so she made the perfect bait. And even Sudo had a nice impression of her. Her grades were also top-notch, making her the perfect candidate. But there was one slight problem. Horikita hated her guts. When class ended, he reached out to Kushida, asking her for her help. Of course, this would also be a perfect way for Kushida to get close to Horikita. She accepted and also genuinely wanted to help the trio. But there was a catch. Kushida wanted to attend the study group. This was perfect since with the current lineup, it would be a gloomy session. They would start tomorrow, so Kushida got to work setting things up. She already had everyone's contact information except for Ayanokoji and Horikita. Kushida asked, "Are you and Horikita in a relationship?" Turns out that was a big rumor amongst the girls that they were together. Of course, Ayanokoji denied it and swapped contact information with Kushida. 2 girls in one day. Not bad at all. Ayanokoji went back to his room and received a text from Kushida. Ike and Yamauchi were in, and she also contacted Sudo. The plan was coming together. So Ayanokoji texted Horikita telling her everything. Within seconds, she called him, asking him what the hell was going on. She didn't like it. She was okay with Kushida gathering the trio, but not okay with her participating. Ayanokoji said that she was being ridiculous, but Horikita wouldn't budge. Without Kushida, the trio might leave, he protested. But Horikita was done and ended the call. Defeated, Ayanokoji called Kushida and told her everything. She understood but was worried the study group might fall apart. Talking things through, Kushida told Ayanokoji that she'd take care of everything, and to trust her. He had the feeling that this was going to be a disaster, but it was too late at this point. Cut to the end of class next day, Horikita asked Ayanokoji if he was able to gather everyone. He said yes, and Kushida would bring them along, but wasn't sure if she was attending. This was good enough for Horikita, and they left for the library. Soon Kushida arrived with the idiot trio and a new face, Okitani, who had come close to failing and needed some help. He was slender with blue hair in a short bob cut. Ayanokoji couldn't help but think if he was a girl, he'd be trouble. Kushida asked if Okitani could join, and Horikita agreed. Following that, Kushida asked if she could join. Horikita was about to refuse, but Kushida cut her off, saying that she was worried. She confessed to being lucky on the test since it was all multiple choice. Allegedly, her grades were closer to Okitani's. It was brilliant. Her ploy was to be in the same category as Okitani, and by that logic, Horikita would have to allow her in. Horikita couldn't deny this and accepted. The group now had a mission: score a 32 and avoid expulsion, but Horikita's goal for them was to score 50. So the studying commenced, and right away Sudo needed help with the math problem, and Ike soon followed. Horikita was surprised since this was pretty easy stuff. She claimed that these problems could be solved by even junior high students. This pissed Sudo off. Horikita explained the problem, but that just confused Sudo more, causing him to throw in the towel. This is not gonna work, he said. Horikita didn't like that. Kushida, understanding things were going south, tried to de-escalate things. It worked a little too well, as the boys now wanted Kushida to teach and not Horikita. So she took up the mantle, but it was still hopeless. This was followed up by more insults from Horikita, calling them incompetent. And that was the final straw, leading to a full-blown argument with Sudo. Sudo asserted that none of the studying mattered once he was a pro basketball player. Horikita scoffed at the idea, telling him that if he couldn't solve tiny problems like this, he had no chance of ever becoming a pro basketball player. Sudo grabbed Horikita by the collar, ready to punch her. Kushida acted fast, trying to get him to back down. Horikita wasn't fazed, and she stared Sudo down. Adding insult to injury, Horikita told Sudo that his dreams were childish, and a simple guy like him had no chance of making it pro. And even if by some miracle he made it, he would never be able to make a livable income. He was foolish for just trying. Sudo was close to snapping, and Ayanokoji would have to wrestle him down if it came to that, but thankfully, it didn't. Sudo left, explaining that he took time off practice for this, but it was a waste. The group crumbled, with Ike following suit, feeling annoyed by Horikita's better-than-everyone attitude. And with that, Okitani and Yamauchi left as well. Horikita concluded that it was just easier to cut the dead weight and let them get expelled. Kushida didn't agree. She wasn't ready to give up on them. Horikita asked Kushida if those were her real feelings. In fact, to her, it looked like Kushida didn't care at all. This struck a nerve, and Kushida left as well. Now it was Ayanokoji and Horikita in complete silence. It was getting depressing, so Ayanokoji said he'd go talk to them. Horikita asked what was the point. Ayanokoji replied that he just wanted to talk to his friend. Horikita accused him of being heartless. Even though he calls them his friends, he's perfectly okay sitting on the sidelines watching them get expelled. He couldn't deny that, but told Horikita to look at things from Sudo's perspective. If he just wanted to play basketball, why come to this school? Horikita wasn't interested and dismissed him. Ayanokoji went looking for Kushida to thank her for today's efforts. He decided to call her phone but got no answer, so he walked around and spotted someone who looked like her, so he decided to follow. The pursuit led him up the stairs to the roof where he noticed someone. It was Kushida, but something was off. In a low voice, Kushida yelled out, "Ah, she's so annoying." It was clear this was about Horikita. Kushida kept ranting about how obnoxious Horikita was, and it would be better if she just died. It was eerie, like she was chanting some sort of curse. The rants continued about how snobby and stuck-up Horikita was, and how that rotten girl could never ever dream of tutoring Kushida. Ayanokoji had just glimpsed the other half of the most famous person in class. He had to get out. But he started thinking, why then agree to work with Horikita? Why force yourself to get along with her? It made no sense. But with a bit of brainstorming, Ayanokoji had a hunch. But he messed up and kicked the door, and Kushida noticed him. She stared at him and asked coldly, what was he doing here? Ayanokoji made an excuse saying that he was lost and was about to leave, but was met with an intense stare. "If I lied, would you believe me?" he replied. She walked down the stairs and pushed Ayanokoji against the wall. She seemed so different than the Kushida he's used to. Her sharp gaze resembled Horikita. She threatened him, "Tell anyone about this, and I won't forgive you." Ayanokoji called her bluff. "What would you do if I did?" She told him flatly she'd blame him for assaulting her, the type of accusation that could ruin his life. "That's a false charge," Ayanokoji argued. "It won't be false," Kushida shot back, as she grabbed his arm and put it firmly on her chest. She explained that his fingerprints were now on her uniform, and she would not wash it and keep it as evidence, and if he ever betrayed her, she would turn him over to the police. After being released from her claws, Ayanokoji asked which was the real her, to which Kushida replied it was none of his business. But Ayanokoji pressed on, asking why involve yourself with Horikita if you hate her? "What's wrong with wanting everyone to like you?" Kushida shot back. "Do you even know how hard that is?" Ayanokoji had to accept he had no idea. Kushida explained that at least on the surface, she wanted to get along with Horikita. She also didn't shy away from telling Ayanokoji that he was gloomy and boring and that she hated him. And with that, Ayanokoji's fantasy of a cute Kushida came crashing down. But Ayanokoji saw a chance to put his theory to the test and asked Kushida if she knew Horikita before she came to the school. Kushida stumbled, but denied it. Ayanokoji laid out his reasoning. When Kushida approached Ayanokoji for the first time, she already knew his name, and that was pretty evident because Ayanokoji introduced himself in the little circle Hirata created. But when Kushida first approached Ayanokoji, she asked about Horikita. How did Kushida know Horikita's name? She never made an introduction. "You befriended me so you could spy on Horikita, isn't that right?" Ayanokoji asked. Kushida asked him to just stop talking. The only thing she was interested in knowing was whether or not Ayanokoji would rat her out. He swore that he wouldn't, and even if he did, who would believe him? Kushida decided to trust Ayanokoji because Horikita did as well, and Kushida knew that Horikita would never trust someone who wasn't capable. Kushida also knew from the bus incident that Ayanokoji hated standing out, and he would do anything to maintain a low profile, and revealing her true nature would put Ayanokoji on the spotlight, and he did not want that. Kushida reverted back to her cheery self and invited Ayanokoji to walk back with her to the dorms. This was straight out of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, thought Ayanokoji. He wasn't sure which one was the real Kushida. Back in his room, Ayanokoji wondered what would happen to the idiot trio. He received a message in the group chat. Sato had joined. They were talking about what happened today with the study group, and the conversation soon turned towards them wanting to bully Horikita. The newest participant, Sato, drove the conversation there. They asked Ayanokoji if he wanted in. Ayanokoji messaged back saying that he would be neutral, and left. He wanted to sleep but couldn't because the situation weighed on him. So he decided to get some juice from the vending machine, and on the way there, he noticed Horikita, so he hid himself behind the vending machine to avoid an awkward conversation. She decided to leave the dorms, so he followed her, but soon she stopped and Ayanokoji noticed another presence. The mysterious voice addressed Horikita, telling her that she shouldn't have followed him here. Horikita was unshaken, calling that person brother and asserting that she wasn't as useless as he once knew. The figure seemed doubtful, pointing out that in her relentless pursuit, she ignored all her flaws. She was rightfully placed in Class D, and nothing she's done over the past 3 years has changed a thing. She shouldn't have come to this school. It was a mistake. Horikita refused to acknowledge any of this, stating that she would reach Class A. After a bit of back and forth, the figure revealed himself. It was Student Council President Manabu. He grabbed Horikita by the wrist. He seemed agitated by the fact that she was related to him, and if anyone found out, he'd be humiliated. He demanded that she leave the school immediately, but Horikita refused. He called her stupid and asked if she wanted to relive the pain of the past. Horikita had none of the traits needed to get to Class A in his eyes. And just before Manabu was about to slam Horikita onto the concrete floor, Ayanokoji leapt from the shadows and grabbed his arm. This caught him off guard. Ayanokoji urged him to let go, but Manabu wouldn't comply. Horikita weakly asked Ayanokoji to let go, so he did. Manabu instantly moved to attack Ayanokoji, but he avoided it. His attacks were brutal, and next he would go for a kick. If it connected, it was lights out for Ayanokoji, but he avoided it. Ayanokoji slapped his hands away, evading all blows. Manabu was impressed. Not only did Ayanokoji have the reflexes to go toe-to-toe with him, but he also knew exactly what he was thinking. He asked if Ayanokoji practiced anything, to which he responded yes, piano and calligraphy. Manabu asked Horikita if Ayanokoji was a friend, to which Horikita said no, just a classmate. Manabu lectured Horikita, stating that she kept confusing independence with solitude, but with Ayanokoji here, things might get fun. And with that, the student council president took his leave. Ayanokoji, not wanting things to get awkward, decided to head back, but Horikita called out to him, asking if he heard everything. He replied he did. Her brother was strong, Ayanokoji said. Apparently he was ranked 5th Dan in karate and 4th Dan in aikido, Horikita replied. For reference, each Dan takes multiple years to achieve, and at 4th and 5th Dan level, the martial artist is considered a master and qualified to lead a class as a sensei. So yeah, he was incredibly strong, thought Ayanokoji. Horikita grilled him, asking if he held a Dan rank himself. He replied no, but he did practice piano and tea ceremony. They decided to head back because if anyone saw them out together, it would spread further problematic rumors. On the way to the dorms, Ayanokoji asked if Horikita was okay with the outcome of the study group. Horikita was over it, saying that she'd rather leave them to Hirata. But the idiot trio hates Hirata, Ayanokoji pointed out. But that wasn't her problem, shot back Horikita. She reasoned that if the idiot trio got expelled, then only the capable students would be left, making things much simpler. Ayanokoji thought for a second and stated that Horikita's logic was flawed. He asked if she considered what the consequences were if someone is expelled for Class D. If tiny things like being late to class and talking on the phone warranted a loss of points, then what would multiple expulsions incur? This set the gears in Horikita's mind in motion. What would the penalty be? Would they subtract 100 points? 1,000? 10,000? It could even be 100,000 points, and if that was the case, then they had no chance of reaching Class A. Ayanokoji accused Horikita of having a major flaw. She saw everyone else as troublesome and secluded herself. He believes that the reason she was placed in Class D was because she thinks she's superior to everyone else. She scoffed at the idea, saying that that would make her the same as Sudo. Ayanokoji shot back, saying that yeah, in terms of academics, you beat Sudo. But what if the next exam was sports? She could never match up to Sudo no matter how much she tried. And if the exam was a discussion, then Ike would run circles around her. Everyone has their merit, stated Ayanokoji. He reminded her of what Sai-sensei said. Academics aren't everything in this school. Finally, Ayanokoji pointed out that even if Horikita says that she doesn't care, she cares. She cares a lot. That's why she was the only one who went out of her way to create another study group. Horikita accepted defeat and agreed with Ayanokoji, but was still doubtful. Why was he helping her? What did he have to gain? Because I want to know what a person with true merit looks like. I want to see what equality is, said Ayanokoji. That was his reason for coming to this school. Horikita still wasn't convinced, but did change her mind. She would do her best to help the idiot trio avoid expulsion. Ayanokoji and Horikita shook hands, reaffirming their arrangement to work together. A deal with the devil, thought Ayanokoji. It was now 2 weeks until midterms. Ayanokoji and Horikita were in class trying to figure out how to help the idiot trio. They knew the uncomfortable truth. Without Kushida, it wasn't happening. Horikita, holding back her pride, asked Kushida for help, but this time she wasn't so readily willing. Kushida asked why Horikita wanted to help the trio. Horikita came clean, saying that she wanted to get to Class A and that's her only reason. Kushida was happy with the honesty and accepted under one condition. She wanted to take part in helping them reach Class A. Horikita bit her tongue and agreed, saying that if this goes well, she'll consider it. So the unholy alliance was formed, and Kushida got to work right away setting up another meeting. But once the idiot trio arrived, they instantly noticed Horikita and Ayanokoji and were on edge. They assumed that Ayanokoji told Horikita about the whole bullying thing. Ayanokoji neither confirmed nor denied that fact, knowing that the guilt would play in their favor. The conversation started with Horikita asking them if they considered Hirata's study group. They did not, and were still planning on pulling an all-nighter. Suddenly, the conversation started to deviate towards what happened last time, with Horikita and Tsudo's comments getting more heated by the second. But this time Horikita seemed different. She steered the conversation towards Tsudo's best interest, stating that he wouldn't be able to play basketball if he were to get expelled. Even though it made sense, Tsudo was still pissed off and wanted an apology, while Horikita, being herself, said bluntly, "I hate you." She let Tsudo know that the only reason she's helping him is because it's in her best interest. Things now made sense for Tsudo. He revealed that the biggest reason he's not keen on study groups is because it cuts into practice time. No one on the team takes study breaks, not even for big tests. If it was like last time, the conversation would have ended there, but Horikita was prepared. She noticed that the idiot trio wasted all their time in class. That's 6 hours. So instead of cutting into precious free time, she wanted them to use that time to study. But Kushida objected, saying that wasn't that unreasonable? Even if they managed to discipline themselves, they wouldn't understand any of the class material. But Horikita accounted for this, laying out her plan. Every class period was followed by a 10-minute break. The idiot trio would pay attention in class, and on the 10-minute break, they would be tutored by Horikita, Ayanokoji, or Kushida via a one-on-one lesson. They would repeat that process throughout the day. On top of this, Horikita would have answers ready for every single question with simple explanations. This would eliminate note-taking, making it easier to memorize the content in class. This plan was viable because each period covered little material, and in case they couldn't cover everything in the 10-minute break, they would utilize 20 minutes of their lunch. But even with this well-thought-out plan, Tsudo still wasn't convinced. His pride got in the way, and he was about to leave. Ayanokoji decided to throw a Hail Mary, asking Kushida if she had a boyfriend. She was flustered, saying no, and why is he asking now? Ayanokoji then dropped the atomic bomb, asking if Kushida would date him if he got a 50 on the midterms. This started a chain reaction, with Ike and Yamauchi claiming that they would get the 50 and date her. Kushida finally understood, offering up a date to whoever scores the highest. Ayanokoji knew that both Ike and Yamauchi would fall for this given their total infatuation with Kushida. But he also knew Tsudo would bite, not because he wants Kushida, but because he's competitive. This was on full display during swim class. Ayanokoji had just shot 3 delinquents with 1 girl. The plan successfully commenced, and the idiot trio cleaned up their act, actually paying attention in class. Ayanokoji pondered, what made a student exemplary? If it only wasn't academics, then why put Tsudo through a test that would be impossible on his own? Was it to see if he could overcome it? Couldn't be just that. There had to be more. It was lunchtime and they decided to study in the library. This helped them avoid Hirata's group, which would be a distraction. But lunch was first, and Kushida asked Ayanokoji to accompany her. They decided to go to the cafe. There, they noticed Kowenji surrounded by girls who were all third years. Seems like he had a thing for the older ladies. Apparently, money made you popular. Who would have thought? Ayanokoji asked Kushida what type of guy she was into, and she referred to a knight in shining armor. She asked Ayanokoji if Horikita was his type. Ayanokoji thought for a second. Yeah, she's cute, but that's only skin deep. Kushida revealed that there was a popularity ranking amongst the first year guys, and Ayanokoji wasn't as unpopular as he thought. There were rankings for hotness, wealth, and even creepiness. Ayanokoji ranked number 5 for hotness. Satonaka from Class A was number 1, and Hirata was number 2. But unfortunately, Ayanokoji was ranked high in gloominess. Ayanokoji felt nothing for these rankings because, practically speaking, it didn't translate to anything in his life. No cute girl confessed to him, no nothing. And with that, Ayanokoji was done with the pleasantries and asked Kushida why she invited him to lunch. It wasn't just a chat because they both knew she hated him. Kushida got down to business, asking if he had to choose between Horikita and her, who would he choose? Ayanokoji reached for his usual response. He'd be neutral. Kushida asserted that that was idealistic and best, and at most times not possible, and urged that if she and Horikita were to butt heads, that he should consider helping her. They finished up at the cafe and went over to the library. Being a bit late, Horikita wasn't thrilled, and Ike noticed our hero arriving with Kushida, which made him incredibly jealous. Idiot Trio lamented how much work there was to do. They were being a bit loud, which provoked a nearby student to call them out. It was Yamawaki from Class C. After some heated back and forth, he started taunting them for being in Class D. This led to a full-blown confrontation, from both sides garnering more and more attention. But before it worsened, they were shut down by Ichinose from Class B. But during the argument, Yamawaki pointed out something important. What Class D was studying for wasn't even on the test. This set off alarm bells, and they confronted Sai-sensei in the faculty room. And she straight up confirmed their doubts, revealing that the test topics were just changed last Friday. This pissed everyone out because there was just 1 week left before the midterm, and none of the other teachers seemed to care that there was a big mistake happening. Sai-sensei shrugged it off, saying that they had 1 week left, which was more than enough time, and kicked them out. Ayanokoji asked Kushida to inform the rest of the class of the updated topics. Horikita seemed visibly shaken. They lost a week's progress, and keeping the idiot trio motivated would be tough. Sudo stepped up and made a massive compromise, deciding to take a break from club activities next month. This inspired Ike and Yamauchi to give it a shot as well. Ayanokoji left the tutoring to Horikita and Kushida because he had something else to do. What happened with Sai-sensei in the faculty room seemed way too much of an oversight to just be a simple mistake. Fast forward to lunch the next day, Ayanokoji walked purposefully towards the cafeteria but was interrupted by Kushida. She decided to tag along. He didn't mind. Kushida had caught on to what Ayanokoji had in mind, so they made their way to the caf. Ayanokoji bought tickets for 2 meals, but didn't line up for food. And then he waited, observing students until he found the one, an upperclassman with a vegetable meal. This was his target. He approached him, confirming the details, and after a bit of talking, Ayanokoji got down to it. He asked if the upperclassmen had the test for their upcoming midterm. He did have them, but for a price. And after negotiations, it came to 15,000 points. The savvy Ayanokoji even got him to throw in a bonus, answers to the first evaluation test. Kushida asked if this was okay, but Ayanokoji relieved her worries. Technically, he wasn't breaking any rules. Transfer of points is legal, and nowhere in the rules does it say that you can't buy old tests, which means it must be fair game. Also, judging from the interaction, it doesn't seem like this was his first time, so the other classes must be doing the same. But what if the test this year is different from the last? Well, that's where the bonus comes in. If the evaluation test from the previous year matched the evaluation test from this year, then there's a massive chance the midterms will be the same. And once he received the old test, his theory was correct. The previous evaluation matched the current one, word for word. And while the answers could save Class D, Ayanokoji decided that he wouldn't spread them until the day before, just in case he's wrong and the tests aren't identical. If he released them now, that would eliminate any motivation the students had to study. Kushida asked how he figured all this out. Well, it dates back to the midterm announcement. Sai-sensei mentioned that there was a certain way for everyone to pass, fully knowing how bad some of their grades were. Ayanokoji had another favor to ask Kushida. He wanted her to give the old questions to the class. Ayanokoji did not want to be in the spotlight. Fast forward to Thursday, and the midterms are tomorrow. Kushida distributed the old copies of the test to the entire class. Everyone was thrilled. Horikita even praised Kushida. In fact, Horikita took a moment to genuinely thank her for everything, acknowledging that they would have failed miserably without her. Kushida smiled and said that this was all in trying to reach Class A, but Horikita had to confirm one thing. You hate me, don't you, Kushida? Even Ayanokoji was shocked. Kushida couldn't deny it. Horikita wasn't fazed, stating that she only wanted to know and didn't care as to why. She could now work with Kushida without hesitation. Tomorrow arrived. and it was midterms. Sai-sensei announced that if everyone passed both the midterms and the final, they'd be awarded a vacation. The first period test was social studies. Ayanokoji was thrilled. All the test questions were the same. He looked around the room and no one seemed troubled. He also noticed something else. Horikita's teachings were completely in line with the test. She was able to accurately predict the problems, which was quite impressive. The second and third tests were Japanese and chemistry, and the fourth was math, followed by a break. Everyone was in high spirits, except for Sudo. Turns out he fell asleep last night, partway through studying the English questions. He only had 10 minutes to review, and since it was English, it was hard to memorize. Horikita helped him out, telling him to focus on short questions that had a lot of marks. The bell rang, and it was time for the English test. It was all up to Sudo at this point. Midterms were over, and everyone approached Sudo. He was visibly shaken. Horikita encouraged him, saying that he did his best and didn't take the easy way out. He should be proud of what he accomplished. She also apologized, saying that she looked into how tough it was to become a pro basketball player and she had no place insulting his dreams without understanding what it took. And that if he applies the same effort for basketball that he did to the midterms, there's no way he's not going to make it. This sincere apology stunned everyone, and Sudo started to grow feelings. It was the day of reckoning. Sai-sensei walked into class and hung a large sheet of paper with everyone's name and midterm results. She was impressed. More than 10 people scored perfect in math, Japanese, and social studies. But more importantly, what did Sudo score? He got 60 points in 4 of the main subjects and a 39 in English. Remembering 32 being a pass, the idiot trio were ecstatic. But the cheering soon came to a halt when Sai-sensei drew a red line under Sudo's name. He had failed. Sudo protested, saying that 32 points was enough to pass. Sai-sensei pointed out that nowhere did she say 32 was a passing grade on the midterms. To pass the midterms, he needed a 40 in English. But how did they calculate this? Well, each class had a specific passing grade set for them, which was the average divided by 2. In Class D's case, 79.6 divided by 2 was 39.8. This was because the average was way higher now that a lot of the students scored perfect and good marks. Sai-sensei wrote out this formula on the blackboard, and Sudo was defeated. But before Sai could move on, Hirata interrupted, asking if there was any way to avoid this. Sai expressed coldly that there wasn't. Hirata asked if he could see Sudo's test answers. Sai complied and revealed them, and there were no grading mistakes. And with that, homeroom came to a close. But before things could end, Horikita spoke up, stating that there was an error in setting the passing grade. On the last test, the average was 64.4. If they divided that by 2, it was 32.2, which is higher than 32. But the passing grade was set to 32, ignoring the decimal. If they apply the same logic here, the passing grade should be set to 39. Sai asked Horikita if she knew ahead of time that Sudo would score poorly because she also did so. She scored exceptionally in all her other subjects, but in English, she scored a 51. She sacked her score to help Sudo. This was their last chance, but Sai shot it down, stating that they didn't omit the decimal. They rounded it. 32.2 became 32, and 39.8 was rounded up to 40. And that was it. While everyone was depressed, Ayanokoji had to take a small bathroom break. Or that's what he told everyone. And he made a beeline right for the faculty room. But he didn't have to go far, and caught Sai-sensei waiting for him. He had a question. Sensei, do you think Japanese society is fair? Sai was caught off guard. Quite the change in topic. But Ayanokoji was adamant, wanting to know her answer. Sai said no, not even a bit. Ayanokoji agreed, saying that equality is a fairy tale. Then our hero brought up the fact that they were informed a week before of the change in topics, due to Sai's error. And by extension of this error, Class D was made to take the midterm under unfair conditions. Sai asked if he had a problem with how things played out. She also pointed out that wasn't this a great example of how unfair the world really is? Our protagonist agreed, but said that even though it is unfair, we living beings can still strive for equality, just a little bit. And whether or not she forgot to tell them, a student was being expelled due to unfair conditions. He asked to meet with the people in charge of that expulsion. Sai shot him down, saying that it can't be unturned at this point. This gave Ayanokoji everything he needed, a confirmation that it can be unturned. Sai went on, stating that she knows that he was the one behind buying old tests. She praised him. He far exceeded her expectations. Ayanokoji then made his final move, pulling out his student card. I'd like to buy it. Sai asked what he was talking about. Ayanokoji wanted to buy a 1 point to apply to Sudo's English test. Sai started laughing. Our hero pointed out that on the day they were admitted, Sai said that you could buy anything on campus with points. The midterm is technically a thing. Sai agreed and set the price, 100,000 points. This was sadistic, even for her, since everyone had spent their points and no one had 100,000. I'll contribute as well, said Horikita as she approached them from behind. Sai accepted the deal, and Sudo's expulsion was overturned. Sai revealed to Horikita that Ayanokoji was actually the one who bought the old questions. Sai also revealed that no class had ever been promoted in the history of the school, not even from D to C. She said that the school deemed them defective and trash. Horikita disagreed, saying that they might be defective, but they're not trash. A defective item can become a superior with a little bit of work. We cut to Ayanokoji's room where our hero, Horikita, Kushida, and the idiot trio are celebrating their win. 2 months have passed since the beginning of the year, and surprisingly enough, Horikita was taking part in the festivities, but she was off in a corner reading a novel. The trio wondered how they got Sai to budge, but Ayanokoji and Horikita kept it a secret. But they weren't safe yet. The final exams were coming. The gang wanted points, but it wasn't happening. Sure, they scored better than before, but they were still lower than every other class. Kushida revealed to the idiot trio their pact to get to Class A, and asked them for support. And since it was Kushida, they agreed in a heartbeat. Sudo also did, but he had his eyes on someone else. Horikita now had more allies to help her climb to Class A. Okay, so that was one hell of a volume, and so many things come out to my head after watching that, but I'm just gonna keep the list short at like 5. The first one being Ayanokoji's personality, dude. They're so different from anime to light novel. In the anime, he's more stoic, he's more nonchalant, he just doesn't care. Like, if I make friends, great. If I don't, great. If I help this person out, super. If I don't, whatever, who cares? But in the light novel, he seems to come across as a person who's capable for sure. He can fight people, he can like be good at academics, but he's also really bad in social situations. Like, he's not able to make friends. He's not able to be normal, quote unquote, which by a lot of chapters, you can tell that he really wants to do. So don't get me wrong, I like both. Stoic, badass character, awesome. But also I like a character I can kind of root for and I can personally relate to him. Not in the sense of being good physically, because I haven't done a push-up in like years, or in the sense of being good at academics because I suck. But the part where he's bad at making friends and bad at being social, I can relate to that. I can relate to that a lot. So both are pretty interesting in my eyes, but I really want to see how they develop the character for Ayanokoji going forward in the light novels, because I think it's going to be really good. So the next character I want to talk about is Horikita, and unlike Ayanokoji, I feel like the light novel and the anime versions are very similar to each other, with one major difference. In the light novel Horikita, her characteristics, especially her flaws, are way more pronounced. For example, her inability to make friends and just be social is so overblown. It's in the anime, it's kind of like, oh, she's awkward, she's sassy, it's fine, don't worry about it, it's all good. No, in the light novel, it's so clear how her bad characteristics are holding her back from achieving all her goals. For example, they meet Sudo outside the convenience store. As soon as she walks out, she creates a bad relationship with him right off the bat by just being rude. And when it comes time for her to need Sudo to attend her study sessions, guess what? Sudo hates her guts. And then again, the study session, she completely blows it out of the water by just being, again, rude, which completely makes it fall apart. No matter how much effort Ayanokoji and Kushida put into getting them together, she completely blows it apart, and she almost does it again and again. It's so clear how her bad characteristics are holding her back from being a capable person. By all means, her academics, incredible. She's able to guess literally what's on the test through just studying. But her characteristics literally just keep blowing up every single thing that she needs to do. Even using Kushida. Kushida offers her friendship and offers to help her, but she continually denies it. Yeah, she's evil, but unlike Ayanokoji, like, she could use her to her advantage, but she doesn't. Speaking of Kushida, dude, they did her dirty in the anime. Oh my god. Okay, listen. If Horikita's negative personality traits were axed out, all of Kushida's capabilities were completely trash can. Let's start at the very beginning. The bus scene. Ayanokoji's like, oh, she's so good at navigating social situations and getting people on her side. Second, the study group. Literally, Horikita blows things up and Kushida is able to de-escalate the situation when they figure out they don't get points for this month. Kushida is also able to de-escalate the situation from chaos to people working together. She is immaculate at getting people to do what she wants them to do, even more so than Ayanokoji. Yeah, sure, she's evil, but I like evil characters. Like, sometimes they're fun. Like, I just don't want an evil guy who's like, oh, I'm a bad character. I'm bad, that's it, right? I want depth to my evil characters. And again, she is very hard to read as well. She's probably the only person Ayanokoji can't read. If you noticed in the summary, I was talking about the dark Kushida scene, Ayanokoji was literally at the end like, I can't tell which one is the real her. Ayanokoji, the guy who's so good at reading people, almost better than Horikita, can't really figure out who the real Kushida is. So you can really tell that there's layers to how strong her facade is and how she can just manipulate her characteristics to fit the situation and get people to do what she wants them to do. So dude, I want to see how this character develops. I want to see how this little rivalry goes, because there's a lot of foreshadowing saying that she's going to go head to head with Horikita. So I'm kind of interested to see where this is going to be going. Also, we got to talk about the idiot trio because where were they? Where's the companionship with Ayanokoji? Where's the Pseudo and Horikita butting heads consistently? Like, yo, even like Pseudo falling in love is just so convoluted in the anime. So, for example, in the light novel, Pseudo has all of these situations with Horikita where they're like fighting and everything, and at the end Horikita's like, oh, so your dreams are worth following and you're going to be able to do them if you put in this amount of effort. But in the anime it's more like, oh, Horikita fought for me, yes, I love her now. It was so funny to me, dude. But yeah, they cut out the idiot trio in a major way in the anime, and this is the type of stuff that makes me think that they're not going to go for a second season, because it's pretty clear in the light novel that the idiot trio, especially Pseudo, is going to be a formidable ally for Horikita moving forward, as he is one of the most capably physical person in the class. So this is going to be really interesting to see how it all plans out and how Horikita is able to use these chess pieces in the game in order to reach Class A. Speaking of being cut out, dude, there are so many events that just didn't make the cut. For example, the culture fair scene where President Manabu just silences the crowd with his voice. Not there. The swimming competition worth 5k points. Not there. The faculty scene rooms where Sai-sensei drops hints to get to Class A. Not there. Them getting the wrong questions a week before the exam and having to scramble, and Pseudo making a massive compromise to give up club activities. Again, not there. These are some pretty big events, IMO, but I guess they just didn't make the cut. And so with that, guys, we've covered everything that we missed from the anime in Volume 1. If you like this, please leave a like, subscribe. It helps out the channel so much. And I'm gonna get to work right away on the second volume, and after this, it should be playing if it's already up. Dude, I just want to know what happens next. Like, I'm so on the edge of my seat. I feel like this novel is so different from the anime that I'm going to get so much value out of it. So if you want to keep following this, click the bell. Click like, subscribe. You're going to get that notification. You're going to get the next volume. And I'll see you in Volume 2. Take it easy, guys. Peace.